Cory, it's super exciting to meet you, man. I hear
Yeah,
so many great things.
yeah, you as well. Definitely excited to chat. Hopefully, I'll be a little as eventful as that last guy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Um,
I mean, uh, obviously, Corey, I'm very familiar with what you guys are doing, and I feel like I don't know. It'd be kind of fun to just hear a little bit about your experience too over the last. I mean, it sounds like you guys. I mean, really, like the last year, I know has been huge, but
Be careful. Jeremiah's going to put out an offer to buy you in 50 minutes.
I thought about the synergies between them now that like
dude,
things you have. It makes a lot of sense.
I mean, that's his job. You know that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
it's part of it. I'm actually, yeah, I'm part entrepreneur, part CEO, part capital allocator. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah. But yeah, would love to dive into that. Basically, we launched the company just when we were in college, when we were in our senior year. Got pretty much no traction up until like January of last year, so just over a year and a half. And we were at around like 20 clients. And then from that like year onwards, that first year, we went from 20 to probably about like 500 brands that we started working with. And then after Amped got bought, really like started scaling a lot. That helped a ton. And then today we're at like just over 1,100 total merchants that use us, which is exciting. And yeah, so that's from like a high level where we're at. We're completely bootstrapped as well, mainly because we couldn't raise any money because every college kid wants to raise money. But definitely was a good decision in retrospect. And team of about to be 10 as well.
Dude, that's cool. And I mean, the going from 50 a year and a half ago, or sorry, you said 20 a year and a half ago to 1,100 now. That's pretty sweet. That's massive growth.
Thank you. Yeah. I was definitely super happy about it. Super grateful Amp got bought as well.
I remember when Amp got bought, I saw your website pretty much right after, and I was like, wait, this is Amped. Amped's back. And yeah, you guys definitely came in at the right time. I mean, you know, it was an interesting time to surface.
Yeah, we were definitely like kind of early. Like I think we we were really good at marketing ourselves during that time. We really jumped on it really fast because we were so lean and nimble and we were all in. So we could really direct the product as quickly as we wanted to versus like some more like antiquated or like legacy players. So it made it easy for us to capture a lot of the people that were moving. And just because we were like way more flexible in pricing because everybody else had much higher fixed costs as well, they couldn't like drop down. So we were a lot more willing to basically just completely adapt and pivot towards capturing those people as well.
How did you guys find the problem? Like in college, were you like running e-commerce stores or?
So my co-founder, Sean, he was helping his mom a bit with her store. But to be honest, we were like completely new to the industry. And I think that's kind of why it took us a while to ramp up. And like we had never run a business before really. So it definitely like took us a little while to understand what e-commerce. I still are like learning a lot every day, to be honest. But he was helping her a bit and kind of like identified a problem. But honestly, we've mainly pivoted to like where we're at now. Like we started more in like the loyalty space when we had nobody. So it was just like, that was loosely what we thought we were in. And then slowly pivoted like more towards pop-ups and list growth.
That's wild. What's been the most surprising thing?
Probably, I mean, the beginning, probably how chill everyone is in e-com. Like, because from like, I was doing like a banking internship and my co-founder as well was doing a banking internship. And like, we joined and like, we were like, wow, this is so sick. Like everybody's so like, people were coming on in hoodies and like they were vaping on calls. And we were like, it was like the most chill environment ever to be able to sell to. And my co-founder always says this, but like for first time entrepreneurs, I think it's the best industry to get started in because like people are just very receptive to wanting to try things, I think, versus like obviously in banking, that's literally the exact opposite. And we've had friends who have tried to start like selling software to investment bankers, which is like a Herculean task for the most part. So I think that was pretty surprising at the beginning.
Where did you do banking?
It was actually at Credit Suisse while they were going bankrupt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That must have been interesting.
Yeah, it was really cool. For a summer intern, it was like, if I was full time, I think it would have been super stressful. But for a summer intern, I was just watching like fires come up and whatnot and like seeing people like taking calls, leaving. And like also watching like RMDs and like trying to figure out how to manage a team as like chaos is just going on is a cool experience, I think, when you are an intern.
Yeah, totally.
That's interesting to me that they kept the interns on through that experience. I feel like if I was in their shoes, I'd have just been like, okay, interns, go home. Like, we got to deal with all this.
Yeah. Like,
Dude, Jeremiah.
a lot of them, like nobody got a return offer as well. So I think people are pretty pissed. It's like the MDs were still, some of them were still working kids like 90, 100 hours. And then there was no offers at the end. So like, I think a lot of the interns were pretty pissed by the end of it, but also like they hadn't been bought by them. It was like during the middle of the internship, people got bought by them. So like nobody had any idea what to do.
Okay. So there was still hope for something positive.
Yeah.
Okay.
We thought going into it, and probably like up until last week, that like there would still be a good outcome.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just thought that maybe if it was all doom and gloom, I'd have been just like, go home, don't bother with it.
Wait, Jeremiah, I worked in banking in 2008, right? Like literally during the great financial crisis.
I actually did not know that. That's
on a debt desk. I worked on the structured finance team at Morgan Stanley.
Dude, what was that like?
Exactly. I mean, it sounds very similar to Cory's experience, actually. Yeah, which is why I was asking him. But it was like you saw like desks empty out in front of you. It was like very Game of Thronesy. Like people were screwing each other over because they wanted to stay. They wanted to keep their jobs, and things were actively getting cut. The interns were treated even worse than normal because of the environment. And in this particular case, of the 9, 3 were given offers to return, but none accepted. And so it's a little bit of a different situation because like Morgan Stanley survived, right? Which like barely though, because it's like a massive debt house, or at least it was in 2008. I don't know where the primary business is today, but yeah, Cory, I think that there's a lot of analogy between e-com and finance, which is, like people or founders and finance, which is like, I see a lot of ex-bankers and ex-finance people who are founders, and I'm going to say it in a crass way. It's because like, turns out there's a group of people who like to make money, and so you like find the different ways to do that. And that's like totally fine. Like it is okay to love capitalism.
Yeah, I know very few people who are founders where like the money doesn't matter on some level. So, I mean, I know we talked about this early on. Like for me, I don't, especially like the position I'm in, like I'm not going to get your chance, Zach, at like a $50 million payday doing what I'm doing now. But like, I still wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if there wasn't like if there was no upside, right? Like there's got to be some sort of upside or it's just not worth doing.
I got into a really big argument with someone at a barbecue this weekend that I think the pursuit of money is completely like a great pursuit, because like essentially like anything that you want like has a price tag, and like there's some things that like morally paying for them might not be aligned, but pretty much everything has a price tag in the world. And so like I honestly think that the pursuit of money is like the pursuit of pretty much anything you want. And I think people will go like, oh, like you can't buy happiness or like whatever. And it's like, well, you can't will happiness either. So like, it's like these things are almost like accidental. So if there's one thing that you can pursue and like has like a target, like I think money is one of the cleanest things to pursue.
Dude, can I tell you the funniest thing that I tell people? There's 2 things people say money can't buy. It's like it can't buy time and it can't buy happiness, but that's all I use my money for, is to buy time and buy happiness. And so I'm not sure what those other people are using money for.
Also, money makes me happy. Like in and of itself, it makes me happy. Like it's like scoring on like when you're playing like any game, it's just like dopamine, at least for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do feel like that's probably like a person dependent thing on some level, right? And it's like the cost of chasing money can be pretty significant too. I mean, I would say like I definitely I think it's an interesting perspective, Zach, and I don't 100% agree. I also don't 100% disagree. To me, if you're chasing money, there's got to be like what's the reason for it, right? Like that would be my approach. It's like, what am I actually using that for? There's a lot of opportunities that get opened up if you do have money. But I will say like one thing that I sit here sometimes and I look at like my neighbors who work like 30 hours a week and just like enjoy doing yard work on Fridays, and they're hosting fun get-togethers at their house all the time, and they're just like they have a very relaxed work life compared to me, and they clearly enjoy their life. And sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I could just enjoy that.
But you still can. Like you in you pursuing money doesn't close the optionality of you stopping the pursuit of money.
No, correct. However, I guess what I'm trying to say though is like sometimes I wish like I didn't care about, and to me actually I would say like it's not as much about the money, it's about like the like chasing cool things, like solving hard problems and doing stuff like that. Like that's the part I really love, and I can't stop myself from doing that. Like I've had easy jobs before and I hated it. Like it was, you could have paid me 10 times as much and I wouldn't want to be there, because it was just like, I'm not doing anything that I care about in this context. I also like, part of me wants that level of happiness where it's like, you're just cool with your job. You don't have to like feel like you have to go out and do something crazy. You can just do your job, get paid enough to like do the things you want to do in your free time, have free time. There's that too. But it's like, I just can't do that. There's something in me that just like won't let me exist like that.
Yeah. And I think that's common, by the way. Like I was literally making 3 times as much at my prior job than I currently make. And I have a great life. But every interaction I wanted to rip my face off. But this is like exactly the point, is that you have more options and you can use the capital in exchange for the things that make you happy, or in exchange for time. So you know what I mean? Like I think it's like perfectly reasonable. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I think it's like a perfectly reasonable thing. And anyway, to like bring Cory back into it, I was like, that's why I find like, kind of makes sense that an ex-banker has started a company.
Yeah, I also think it's like a very much founder mentality as well. Like Jeremiah, you're talking about like the go that you always want to do something as well. And like we were talking as well about like them, like eventually we want to sell the company, and we like make that very clear. But then we realistically, even if we got the money, we're pretty much all broke right now for the most part. But like even if we sold the company, we'd have no idea what we do after, other than go and build another company. So it never really feels like there's like an opportune moment to sell, other than maybe like when we got slightly older. But like we're 23, we have no families or kids. If we sold, we'd probably just start something new. So yeah, definitely like I think that's very much like a founder. At least like a lot of founders just think like that. Like you're just always working. You always want to be working and doing something, rather not be like mowing the lawn and doing stuff like that.
Mowing the lawn is an interesting one, because I see that a lot of people who reach retirement age end up, I don't know, developing the green thumb. And it's because, especially if they're a pretty motivated person, conscientious person, wants to make things better, they want to work, right? Then it's like, well, what do I work on? I don't know, I work on family, I work on the garden, right? I set about improving the state of things so that they're better than they were before. And I think that's a big part of what you guys were talking about in terms of money as well. It's like, at what cost, right? Because if it's at the cost of, I don't know, the emotional cost is way too high, then you're like, fuck this. Like, I'd rather make less, right? Or if, I don't know, I think it relates to interpersonal relationships as well, right? If you had a relationship with someone and it cost you more than you were getting in return, friendship, romantic relationship, then you would feel like you were being used. You would be operating in an unprofitable state, right? Like if you did so much for your friends or your family or a romantic partner, and the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, that would be where it felt bad, right? So I think that's the distinction here. Money is obviously the goal, but it can't cost you everything. You can't be like ripping your hair out, with a gun in your mouth every day, right?
Yeah, totally. By the way, the whole like work on your family or spend more time with there is a limit to how much time your family wants to spend with you too. So, like I just want to, like that ends up happening also. So like it kind of turns out you kind of end up at the same place no matter what.
Well, I also think with like anything, I think quality matters way more than quantity in like pretty much every sense. And so like this is an extreme example, but if you pursued money aggressively, like the quality time of like, let's just say you go on a family vacation and if you just pursued money like aggressively and you flew private versus like hanging out in an airport, it's like, well, then you just like increase the quality of time, and like the volume doesn't actually matter that much. I don't know. I generally think about most things as like density. I actually have like the periodic symbol for density tattooed behind my ear, because it's just like, I think it's like the only thing to optimize for. So, well, how much like work and output can I get in the most limited time that I input? So it's like, if I'm going to spend time with someone, like, cut the bullshit. Let's just talk. I don't care about the weather. Like
100% agree.
And same thing with work. Like, I'm not going to like pedal around and be like, oh, like, it's like, no, like I'm going to have like incremental time input, and like, what's the most amount I can get out to then do something else with.
So does anybody understand why there's so much stigma around the word profit? People go, oh, this company doesn't care about doing something good for the world. They only care about profit. Every time I hear that, I think, whoa, that sounds like a pretty good thing to be pursuing, creating more value than you're consuming.
Do you want to know? So I used to be one of those people. I used to be like a full-on hippie, like no cell phone, ear piercing, loose clothes, shabby hair, like that. I was that guy when I was 18.
For real?
Oh, dude, yeah. I went from that to Morgan Stanley to founder. Yeah. Live the range, man. Live the range. So, and let me tell you what I did not correctly calculate. It sounds idealistic because you think that if you don't pursue money, what you're pursuing is like benefit, and or some format of like, hey, let's try to benefit people, and or let's try to create more meritocracy. Okay, so like that's what most of those people, like that's what I used to think when I was 18. And then I went to the place where I thought that you could do that, which is like academia, right? So I got my PhD. It turns out what fills the void of money is neither of those things. It's power, okay? And power is much more perverted than money. And this is the thing that most people don't realize, is that as soon as you take that out, like you don't actually replace it with these other ideals, you replace it with power. And this is also where most capitalists say like, hey, you should read George Orwell, because George Orwell does one of the best jobs from a literary perspective of explaining how this happens, right? Like all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. You end up with power as the thing that you trade over money. And that is, it is just so much worse. Like it's so much worse.
Or what gave you that realization when you were in academia? Like, what about academia specifically?
Yeah, so in academia, the metric that you use, like there's two things you use to signify power. The first is citation. So like citation roughly follows like what journal do you publish in, and then how many times do you get cited, and then there's these things called impact factor and so on and so forth. So that's one bucket. And then the other bucket is who do you know who has influence such that your paper gets accepted into the best places and then you get the best jobs. Because without any other thing to transact, you end up transacting on influence and on power, right? And so it turns out that transacting with capital is actually much better. It's more meritocratic, it is clearer, you can price things, right? Because in other systems, you're still pricing them, but it's just actually done in an obfuscated way. And so it actually ends up becoming less meritocratic. And when you see that in front of your eyes, you're like, okay, I get it now. Like I actually finally get it. And that's what made me sort of like really, really appreciate like the power of self-sustaining for-profit business in order to distribute your ideas and distribute your products to the world in a competitive fashion where the market basically pulls what it wants and pushes away what it doesn't want. It turns out economics works, right? Like that's like kind of the thing that you realize eventually. And like every system that is not an economic system is way more perverted.
Yeah, I can agree more. So interesting. I don't think you're going to get any pushback here. Cory, tell me you're a communist so we can get the other side.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it was a European bank, right? Like, obviously. So...
Yeah, I'm still young and cool and communist. But I think, like, to your point as well, for one thing that I've realized is that, like, from running a business as well, versus like taking economics classes like in university is that often when you are pursuing profit with some foresight over like multiple years, is that most of the time doing the right thing, whether that's like for customers or employees, generally follows suit that you're going to get good profits. So building a sustainable business versus like the financial firms that like Rashad that you mentioned, like 2008, short-term profit pursuit, you end up losing more, everybody's worse off. But if you have foresight over the long term for your business and for everything, then it usually accrues to also just more profits as well. And I guess I didn't really like, so I definitely couldn't agree more as well.
Yeah, I don't want to go deep into this, but money has to mean something over a long time period for people to want to do that. Otherwise, they just get out of cash. But yeah, let's. I think this is a really good segue into Jeremiah's tweet on not operating profitably and giving away 3 million copies of software for free. I thought this was an awesome tweet. I really enjoyed reading it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Jeremiah, if there are any that are outside of this tweet.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good segue. So yeah, just very short, like summary of this. When in 2012, I launched a WordPress extension business, specifically WooCommerce. And at the time, WooCommerce was kind of like the up and coming platform. I mean, Shopify existed, but open source software was dominating the e-commerce space, along with basically like enterprise stuff. Like, the owning your own e-commerce store was kind of a relatively new thing, and people started with open source. And it was really interesting because the expectation of that ecosystem was that you would, it's open source, so you can create code, but your code is licensed under the GPL license, which basically states that like if you publish this code, anybody can use it, redistribute it, do whatever they want to with it. No limits on that. And so if you're building code for WordPress, that's the WordPress license. And so that is how your code gets processed in that context. So the expectation and also just like that system that creates made it so that you would basically sell like a one-time download to your code. And that was the process that was used back then. And then essentially like technically like Cory could go buy my code, pay me the $15, and then he could go put it on his website for $5 and resell it. And that's totally cool. There's no limitations to that. And so it was interesting because I started in that ecosystem when was selling stuff, but it's, like any project in software, like you start, and when you don't have anybody using it, you just build, right? You build. There's no supporting of existing users that you have to worry about. And so as you go through this process, it was interesting to see, like, we built something, it was really interesting, people liked it, but then as soon as you get into this like supporting users state, there wasn't enough money coming in to both support users and build new things. And so you just end up in this state of no innovation. And so I think it's an interesting commentary on the WooCommerce piece of the industry versus a Shopify piece of the industry, because I think in that context, WooCommerce was significantly better than Shopify at that time. Like, that's not a question in my mind in terms of like the ability to build a sophisticated site. And in some ways it's still better today in that like you actually own your own data, you own your own website, you can change whatever you want to. There's no limitations to that. But because of it being open source and the financial incentive not being high enough for people to actually innovate in that space, it eventually reached a point where all of the innovation is happening, at least in this like independent e-commerce world, the innovation is happening in Shopify because the money is happening in Shopify. And you can see even for myself as a developer, I left that ecosystem because I was like, I can't hardly pay rent. I have, hundreds of thousands of stores actively using my software, and I don't make enough money to like actually like there's no incentive for me to keep doing this. And I think like over time there's been a big shift. And then you get to a point where, as of call it 2018, people just stopped. Like you wouldn't start in the WooCommerce ecosystem at that point. You would just start in the Shopify ecosystem because there's just so much more benefit to financially to being in the ecosystem. So yeah, going back to the money conversation, there has to be some sort of financial incentive. Otherwise innovation doesn't happen and builders don't build. And we kind of talked about this a little bit with Shopify in the past too, of like, is Shopify at risk in some ways of chasing out the builders? And I actually got interviewed for a Business Insider article about their their updates to their pricing policy. And that was kind of what I told them. I was like, hey, look, Shopify is like, the ecosystem is so good that even if you increase the fees a little bit, people are going to stick around. But there is always the question of like, what does that look like long term? And is there a world in which like there's not enough incentive for builders anymore? And so anyway, it all comes back to finances. Can you actually like generate an outcome that is worth the investment in the ecosystem? And if you can, then you're going to invest in that ecosystem.
I'll give a spicy take. I think that there is a moment in time, and Salesforce is actually trying to embrace it, where Salesforce Commerce Cloud is actually trying to reaccelerate very aggressively, because they're out like partnering with companies more aggressively than I have seen in the last 3.5 years. So I think that they see this, by the way.
That is interesting. And yeah, I mean, the advantage that Commerce Cloud has is it's all big merchants, right? I mean, depending on if you got a piece of software that you're trying to charge a Shopify merchant, say $50,000 a year to use, it's going to be way easier to sell that in the Salesforce ecosystem, I think.
Let's say.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying there's a category of software where it's like it's hard to sell in the Shopify ecosystem, like once you hit a certain price point. And I think it's probably an easier sell. The volume may be lower, but it's probably an easier sell in the Salesforce ecosystem.
I was just shocked when I heard about the 15% cut. I can't remember who, like it was the founder of Judge Me when he said that it used to be 30% like a few years ago. Like I couldn't imagine trying to build like that with that big of a fee. But I also know that like the App Store is also 30%, I think, for developers on iPhone. But he was basically saying like this is a reality check. Like you can do it with 15% if we did with 30 back in the day as well, which was good to know at least as well.
Incorrect. Total nonsense. And the reason, sorry, I don't mean to be so like direct, but I guess what was Zach was like, I don't have time, want to have high density. It's like totally like using the wrong time point, because at that time, the App Store as a distribution mechanism was actually highly valuable. And so you would pay 15% of revenue for CAC every day and twice on Sunday. Okay, like you would do that. Like a 15% CAC is ridiculous. I mean, that's like so low, that's ridiculous. And so of course you would do that in 2018. But to say that you would do that now is ridiculous, because the App Store does not have that distribution advantage anymore. Like anybody who believes otherwise is just not thinking. Yeah.
I would say like what my preference on the Shopify's fee is interesting, and that like to your point, if Shopify is driving an app install for me, I am happy to pay. Like if let's say it was some sort of commission arrangement, like a 20% lifetime commission, I would pay that, right? If I believe that the reason that somebody installed the app and was using the app was because of the fact that they found it to the Shopify App Store. I know from running surveys to our customers that 90% of our customers, 90% of our revenue does not come through Shopify App Store discovery. It comes through other sources. So in that context, a 15% fee, if you're looking at it in terms of just like what's the impact of the App Store in terms of driving revenue, they're charging me more than they're generating.
Yeah, it's COGS versus CAC. They're not the same.
They're not the same. Yeah. But I do think, and this is where like I actually wish Shopify would change their model. And this is a good venue maybe to kind of kick off this idea. But I actually think like I get that they have a cost of servicing their APIs and stuff for developers. So I think like that in that context, I actually don't have a problem with paying some sort of fee, but I wish it was a flat rate sort of fee, right? Like instead of it being a percentage of your revenue, it's like, hey, it's $2 a month for every merchant that you connect to our API or something like that, right? Where it's like a relatively small fee probably generates them a ton of revenue, covers the costs of their APIs, and then gives me the capacity to go out and acquire more customers without giving up so much of my revenue to make that happen. Because ultimately, that's what I'm doing is I'm bringing my own business to that connection, and so I'm still going to have to pay a fee in that context, but it's not 15% if that's the case. So that would be my preferred model.
You know what's interesting about this? I mean, I guess part of what we're talking about in terms of the price of distribution or the price of just being able to exist on the marketplace is the incrementality of it, right? Are they actually generating that demand for you, bringing you those incremental purchases? But if you weren't happy with the fee, you wouldn't pay it, but you still do, right? Which is an interesting thing, right? Like whether it's, you could say the same thing about e-commerce businesses, getting distribution through Facebook ads, something like 30 to 40% of revenue. The cost of acquisition of demand is, and accessing that marketplace of buyers is 30%, and people pay it, right? Generally speaking, some are going to be lower and some are going to be higher, but you get the gist.
Yeah, I think this shows up in a more aggressive way than you would think. And and the reason I say it's aggressive is because this is why I'm making the comment about Salesforce. By the way, I'm happy with both ecosystems, just to say it, right? Like, I'm fine either way, blah, 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 like all of that good stuff. I'm a capitalist, do what you got to do, the market will play itself out. And I think that this is exactly my point about the way that this ends up happening over time, is that there's going to be a category of developers that are going to spend more of their time helping Salesforce brands, less of their time helping Shopify brands. You have an external market force in the tariffs that disproportionately impact mid-market and smaller brands, because larger brands have multiple suppliers, okay? So they can like redirect where they pull inventory from. Like I was at a dinner 2 to 3 weeks ago, and if you're a brand, like if you're a large brand, you have already done supply side hedging. Like you have 8 suppliers across different countries. If you're a mid-sized brand, you don't have that, okay? You have concentration in your supply side, and usually that concentration is in China. So you have this external force that is pressuring your merchant base. You have a policy that is pressuring your developer base. You open your eyes 3 years later, and it's like the investment into your ecosystem has reduced from both from the merchant side, from the capital side, and from the developer side. And all of a sudden the landscape is different, right? And it's like slowly first and then quickly. And so like, yeah, all these developers will continue to develop and support and things like that. And this is where I think it like shows up more aggressively than you think, is this is how these things play out, basically, right? And so like, yeah, people will happily pay it, right? But the shape of the landscape will shift faster than you think.
And ultimately, the reality is that if I have to pay if I have to pay 15% of my revenue to Shopify or any market, right? Like to be honest, there are other platforms that have tried to charge us money that are not as big as Shopify. And we just have said, okay, fine, we won't build for that platform. It's just not worth it for us. Like if they're going to take this big of a cut, that cut though basically ends up coming out of our customers' pockets ultimately, because that's the only, like, it can't come out of our profit because there's not enough profit for that to happen, right? Just like, I mean, that's the case with like costs having, when there's tariffs like that cost also can't, like the company that is being tariffed may be able to shift a little bit, but ultimately like that cost has to come from somewhere that's not the company's bottom line, or else it's just not sustainable. So it is like, ultimately it ends up actually playing out as a tax on the merchant, and has an impact on like us getting less business because we have to charge more for the product. So it does have like multiple layers of impact, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, in my mind, that's the reason Cory's here doing Alia, right? Cost pressure forces efficiency. You have to be lean. You have to be some scrappy person who's like getting it done and making something incredible, or innovation, right? Because if there's any sort of cost pressure and you're big and bloated and you can't manage that increase in costs, then some amount of market share is going to be eaten up by someone who does it better or does it more, as in leaner, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were discussing even when the 15% came out about like the prospect of moving platforms as well. But like, I mean, I think like there's a valid argument to be made. We also thought the same thing about like that we could move to larger platforms as well. But like for 99.9% of apps, or like 99%, the amount of extra dev work and the cost of the dev work to be able to integrate successfully, and then also like do a go-to-market in that new platform, like it's most of the time we think like too risky, when you either, like for most bootstrap companies, you could raise prices 15% or some percent to cover it, or cut some costs somewhere, that generally it balances out to there's enough still to have in Shopify. that it's not worth the extra investment to go move to those other areas.
I think it's just like juggling, because you could look at it as like a defensive move, but you could also look at it as like an opportunity, like creation thing. So I think you just look at the expansion to new platforms as an opportunity, regardless of like the revenue take on the end. And if the answer is yes there, then it should just happen. If anything, it should happen faster because of, but I don't think like changing where you distribute and like your entire go to market to save, like it's going to cost you way more than 15% of your revenue to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like, it's more like a 3 to 4 year like play out. Yeah. It's not going to happen in the short term. Right.
And this goes back to what I was actually like, part of what I was getting at with saying Salesforce Commerce Cloud, for instance. If your software is $50K a year, it makes more sense in that context. Part of that's because that ecosystem is only, I actually don't know the total number of stores, but it's much smaller than Shopify. Your potential customer base is way smaller. So in order for the economics to be worthwhile, there has to be a high enough price point on that software to actually make that investment. If you're selling software for $100 a month and your potential market is 1,000 stores, it's probably not worth investing in that ecosystem at $100 a month software. But if it's a $2,000 a month software, and that's going to be more attractive to those 1,000 stores than it would be in the Shopify ecosystem, then it makes sense. So it also just depends on what you're selling and the economics of your business.
Have you guys seen this new app called Paper? It's some TikTok influencer who's gone and ripped a piece of WAP and turned it into a SaaS product with a fun name. I quite like this name. The idea is paper as in paper money, but paper impression. This whole like somebody makes a video about your brand, let's say SaaS brand, let's say e-commerce brand. They advertise, right? And then they get paid on a per impression or view basis. The website is terrible, but it's a good name. Have you guys heard about this?
Yeah, it seems like an affiliate platform.
Yeah, it's an affiliate platform. It's like Clippers on WAP, if you guys ever heard about that. People creating content and trading the views of that content for, ad spend, marketing cost.
Got it. Yeah. Did you all ever meet let's see, Bounty Abe?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. He's a friend.
He was doing something similar, but basically like from the order confirmation screen, somebody could opt into creating content for your brand, sharing it, and then they'd get paid based on the impressions. It sounds like it's a hard thing to solve though. Like the platforms don't really want you. Like it's not, I don't know if it's against terms of service, but they don't love it because it's basically like eating into their ad spend. So, yeah.
I also just feel like it's like, we even just know this with our own affiliate program. It's just like ripe for fraud. Like if I was doing nothing and like living in a random island, I would just probably commit fraud using paper.
When I spoke to WAP about this, because they have the user base to make this happen, right? A huge amount of make money online people who would create that content for the people who are advertising with WAP, right? And I said, well, who are you guys going to make unhappy? You're going to make the advertiser unhappy, the one who's spending the money, or the people who are creating the content and defrauding the advertisers? They said, the people who are creating the content, they're going to make those people unhappy. But I couldn't agree with you more, though, that like the platforms, TikTok, Facebook, they're not incentivized to accept that sort of thing, replacing their, monopoly on ad impressions, right?
Yeah, on some level. The reality is that like if the scale's small enough, it probably doesn't matter. But on some level, you're kind of cutting into their revenue potential with something like that.
Something I want to ask you, Cory, is demand gen. Obviously not paper, but what is your channel right now for finding customers?
Mainly inbound from partners, specifically retention partners. That's probably like 50, 60%. 30% is probably just word of mouth and referrals. And then last 10% is mainly like newsletters, events, but events also ties into word of mouth and referrals. But we really don't spend too much on paid media or any of that. We're just starting now, but like basically from 0 to what we're at now was partners and word of mouth.
Have any of you unlocked using paid spend to drive meaningful growth?
I mean, Google, yes. But like, I look at like Google as like, because our first sort of like channel that worked was just SEO because we were such like high intent with like single solution. And then, yeah, Google's been, I would say, like the only one where it's like Meta, like a little bit. I don't know. We actually just performed like a holdout test on Meta last week, and we saw like a drop in like free trial signups, but like not really a drop in new customers. So, I don't know. I'm super curious, Cory. Like when you say those like percentage numbers, what percentage of confident are you in those numbers that you said?
Pretty low. I mean, we just honestly we really just started doing attribution for the most part, and like those are like rough numbers. Also, like it's hard to say because we spend money on events and we might meet a partner there, and then the partner ends up talking to another person, or like they just end up making referrals. So was it really the event, or like did they know about us before? Like my co-founder posts on LinkedIn and gets a lot of traction there, so that might drive it. I feel like we view it more as just like more like brand marketing, and then ultimately, which is I think pretty rare for like a bootstrap startup, and then it just kind of just does accrue to like monthly growth. We're still slowly starting to dial it in more because like we just do need to like manage budget a bit more now that we're a bit larger. But yeah, pretty loose percentages. We just know broadly that partners are like by far our biggest channel.
Yeah. We surprise, use a survey to track ours. And it's very like, I actually feel very confident about the numbers in terms of things like, hey, I know somebody came through an agency and they'll tell us like specifically which agency. But to your point, Cory, like that agency, their relationship with us started in a different place. And honestly, most of that time that's coming through social media, it's coming through events, things like that. So we kind of approach ad spend and like we invest some in things like events. And then we ultimately just we don't do anything with paid ads. I think there's probably a world in which paid ads could work, but we feel like our self-serve needs to be better. We feel like there's a lot of things like that where it's like, it just doesn't feel like it's worth doing until we really unlock like making it feel like a really magical experience to set up on your own.
Yeah, Zach, do you think SEO is still relevant as well?
If I started a new app today, the first thing I would do is get the website up and write a blog post for like my highest intent keyword. Like the first blog post, which probably needs to be updated, that I ever wrote on our blog has brought in probably more customers than anything I've ever done. But the thing we have to think about that too is that like, and the reason why I say more than anything I've ever done is that our number one growth channel is either share links or like word of mouth. Like the K factor on the SEO, like super high intent people is, I think for us, like pretty high. But we're also like very self-serve. Like I think our self-serve versus sales assisted percentage is like maybe 2% sales assisted and the rest is self-serve. So I think that comes into it as well. Because I do think that like, I could be wrong about this, but the buying journey for someone with like a crazy, like burning desire who's searching for a solution, the thing that they probably don't want to do is get onto a sales call. Or like if that's like the blocker is just like an email form, then it's like you didn't actually solve their problem. So if like the person's searching for a solution, if the solution was an email form, then like I feel like you didn't serve that person. So if you have good self-serve, I think SEO is like great.
And what about that? Are the ads in like, do you guys manage that in-house as well?
The attribution question is the wrong question to ask, right? Because if you think about like for Format or for Foreplay, for example, people are probably having multiple touch points, right? And over different periods of time as well. So if you looked at, I don't know, you're an e-commerce brand or you're a software brand, and you look at your spend for the last month, but you have maybe in the case of Format, consideration periods that are quite long, right? Or in the case of us, a consideration period that isn't, in that 7-day window. You might be achieving some interest, some clicks, some exposure from people who've made an organic search, and then they close on a paid ad. They find you on a paid ad, and then they close on an organic search. They, let's say, perform an organic search, and then they close on a paid search term. There's just so many different ways that people engage over longer payback periods that I think it gets really simple. If you're not investing in the growth of the business, then is the business growing, right? Maybe. Then you found something, right? But it's not requiring investment. And then if you invested more into the growth of business, let's say for Mart, for example, they put 10K into ads today, right? If that netted more than 10K over the lifetime of the impact of that ad spend, of that marketing, of taking their product to market, then it would be good. But across different attribution windows and different analyses, you're going to get different answers, right? Oh, we didn't generate $10,000 of revenue within 7 days, within 30 days. So it was burnt investment. But it probably wasn't, right? If it was, let's say, shown to the right people, and then over a long enough time period, enough people adopted the product, whether it's discovery, new people who hadn't heard about FOMAT before, or it's closing sales that were found at events, that were found over organic from a blog, right? I think attribution might be one of those areas that people get nerd out on. They go really deep, and then before they know it, they realize that actually I just needed a survey. Like I wasted so much time on this. I needed a survey to ask people, where they found this, right?
Yeah, it is really interesting that the like every method of understanding your customers is very flawed. But I actually do think in SaaS, and this is ironic because we don't serve SaaS, we serve e-commerce, but especially in SaaS, like the consideration windows are so long. Not always, but usually it's like pretty long. And so we actually love the question, how did you first hear about us? And then what brought you to our site today? Looking for like the differences between the two. And then how long did you know about us before signing up or before placing your purchase or whatever that is? And then getting to see the difference. And, somebody who comes through Google, high intent, to your point, Zach, like their Google search, anything like that, they're going to be really high intent. It's probably a pretty fast consideration cycle. Somebody who learned about you through a friend, it may have been 2 years ago, and they just weren't in the right moment to make that decision. And then there's all those touch points since then. So, and obviously you can't capture everything, but it's I don't know, it's a good tool, and it's very cheap. That's the other thing that's nice. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars a month on some sort of like click tracking software or MMM or anything like that. So
I mean, think about it in the case of FOMAT. Somebody could see an ad for FOMAT or go to a webinar or whatever it happens to be, right? They could see something, not meaningfully engage in a way that they could be tracked, right? And then convert 90 days later, right? And whatever the investment was into delivering that meaningful impression, right, probably isn't getting captured, tracked, unless you're asking that customer on the way in, where did you find us, right? And then they're able to recall it properly because they've had all of these different touch points since, right?
Yeah, and I don't know that this is the best way to think about things, to be honest, but I really only care about how somebody discovered me or how they remember discovering me. Because at the end of the day, like that's the thing that, if that is the thing that sticks in somebody's mind, I want to be doing more of that thing. I think some people would disagree with that, but ultimately, like that's what I care about. And I think in software in particular, that's really important. Maybe that's less important in a world where you're basically like, spamming people with ads on Instagram. But from my standpoint, that's what I like to look at.
I have like a funny like SEO story. So like I did like all of our customer support like way longer than I should have, and I would always just like ask. I would send like a personal note just asking the question of where you heard about me. We still don't actually have a survey. We should probably add that in. But really, really early on, this guy, I messaged this guy. I was like, hey, like I don't know, he was maybe like customer like 200 or 300 or something, and I was like, hey, like how did you like hear about us? And he's like, you're not going to believe this. And he's like, I was having an argument with my like friend who's a female about foreplay, and like I was like looking up like things to support my argument, and I just happened to also run Facebook ads, and so I was like, all right, like people always said it was a bad name, but it was like I know it at least brought in one customer for like a missed keyword search. But I also think too, like one of the biggest like unlocks for SEO that I think almost like any SEO agency like wouldn't it not tell you, and it's been like the reason why we haven't actually invested that much more in SEO anymore. Like all of our top performing stuff I just wrote, and when you try to scale SEO, it gets a little bit weird, and like people are always trying to look for like kind of like big swings, but I think that the real important thing is just like really, really small breadcrumbs to pick up. And so like for your guys's like niche, if you were to go in like an SEO like research tool, the juiciest stuff to look at would be like Shopify pop-up app, like stuff like that. But like you're never going to rank for that. And in a weird way, like you're not actually like serving that search query at like a level of intent that would actually be that meaningful. It could probably be better to just like bid on the keyword for ads. But if you guys have like random little features, like, you know what I'm saying? Like customized button in Shopify pop-up app or something. And like, that's the H1 and you just write like a 500 word article. And like now with like ChatGPT, I did all of our SEO stuff before ChatGPT, which is like, I can't even imagine doing that stuff right now. But like, I'm a big believer in that stuff. Like, I think they like compound. And then I also think that the smaller keywords are great because it just like, it's more articles, it's more service area for links and stuff like that. And I don't know, I was doing our Google Analytics the other day and we're now getting like a good amount of traffic from like ChatGPT and Perplexity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so like all of this stuff just feeds into like the new search behavior as well.
Totally. That is the one thing I was going to say is at the end of the day, I know there's this question of like, you know, is Google search going to matter? But I think that SEO principles that have driven people to find you via Google search are going to be pretty similar in an LLM context. I'm sure there's probably like some things that I don't understand yet on how all that works, but I do think there's like most of it carries over pretty well.
We're also in a huge bubble of early adopter. Like all of us on this call are a huge bubble of early adopter. Search traffic is still valuable as fuck. I was at like dinner the other night and it was literally a developer that works at Amazon. And he was like, so how much do you use like ChatGPT? Like inquiring if like he should like be using it. It was like 3 years ago or two, whatever it was when it was like the same conversation. I think there's multiples of that. And I think most people that work jobs are not anywhere close on the early adoption curve. And so I think it's 100% still super valuable.
Did you guys hear about that? This is kind of cliche and very old, but that guy who managed to get his face to rank first on Google search for world's most handsome man. He was like this ginger dude from Ireland. And so when you searched up world's most handsome man, it was Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and then this random ginger dude. Because like Google's, I guess, systems for delivering people the right result for their search were not as sophisticated as they are now. I feel like I saw something, who was it? There was a software product the other day that is posting AI YouTube videos of just reviews, comparing them to other people. And it's a pretty sophisticated little video of somebody who looks like a content creator talking to the camera and saying, I prefer this over this. These are the pros, these are the cons. It's like, this is modern SEO, right? Getting these kinds of videos up, like, and thousands of them, right? And that was it. I was searching in ChatGPT and that video was recommended to me. So I clicked on it. I was like, this dude's AI, but it's managed to, wiggle its way into a ChatGPT result.